שם שומר ישראל. הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל. יומם השמש לא יקקה וירח בלילה. אדוני ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. אדוני שומרך, אדוני צילך, על יד ימינך אדוני צילך. שלח אורך ועמיתך המה ינחוני, יביאוני אל הר קודשך. אבוא אל מזבח אלוהים, אל שמחת גילי. ותקרב רינתי לפניך אדוני, כי דברך הבינני. תבוא רינתי לפניך הצילני. וכשאקרא ענני, כי דברך גואל עולם. השיבני ברוחך, רוחך רק אתה שומע תפילה, ורק אתה מקיימה. רבות כה רבות עשית למען עבדך, אתה אל נאמן ולעד תישאר. אז אזעק בקולי ואומר, אשרי העם שכך לו, אשרי העם שאתה אלוהיו. וכשאקרא ענני, כי דברך גואל עולם. השיבני ברוחך, רוחך כי דברך גואל עולם. השיבני ברוחך, רוחך. וכשאקרא ירושלים, עיר שחוברה לה יחדיו. שאלו שלום ירושלים, ישליו אוהבייך, יהי שלום בחילך, שלווה בארמונותייך. למען החי ורעי אדברה, שלום בך. שיר המעלות לדוד, עדות היא לישראל, להודות לשם אדוני. עומדות היו רגלינו בשערי ירושלים, אבקשה טוב לה. שאלו שלום ירושלים, ישליו אוהבייך, יהי שלום בחילך, שלווה בארמונותייך. למען החי ורעי
I'm so happy to invite you to the first Arise Digital Summit of 2022. With so many voices growing around the world calling to boycott to Israel's economy, to isolate Israel and the Jewish people, we at Arise do the opposite. Our goal is to connect people like you, and especially business people from the international community, to the Israeli economy, to Israeli business, to Israeli culture. When we asked our members of the Alliance a couple months ago, what would you most like to see or hear in our next summit, the overwhelming majority of you said, we want to learn more Jewish wisdom on business, how to do business, how to succeed in business. What are those ancient Hebrew nuggets of truth and wisdom we can implement into our lives to be more successful? I know that you'll be empowered by what our speakers have to offer, and while you're enjoying the Arise Summit, please consider becoming a member of our Alliance. Thank you. So we're so happy to have today John Medved, the founder and CEO of Our Crowd. And Our Crowd isn't just a fantastic platform for investing in Israeli startups. It is an amazing Israeli startup. John, you really changed the way that venture capital works by opening up to crowdfunding and being able to bring down the level of minimal investment and opening up Israeli startup success to so many individual investors. So more power to you for that, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Caleb. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah. So first of all, what's going on at Our Crowd? I mean, I know you've raised over $1 billion.
We're
right?
actually close to $2 billion.
$2 billion that you've deployed in Israeli startups.
So we started 9 years ago. We actually had our offices nearby in Jerusalem. We've now grown. We're about 300 people, close to $2 billion under management. We're invested in over 300 different companies, and we're invested across many different sectors. So everything from cybersecurity to the next, alternative protein, to mobility, to all kinds of software for privacy protection or compliance, and lots of clean tech, healthcare, things that are really good for the planet. And what we found is that there's this huge hunger among both the listeners today who are going to be sharing this Arise Summit, but also the broader public from all over the world in what's going on here in Israel and the startup nation specifically, but more generally in the world of innovation and in investing. And they see these amazing companies finally go public, but they go public at billions or many billions of dollars,
And you've had a few exits like that, if I'm not mistaken.
We've had a bunch.
Yeah.
We've had actually
unicorn exits.
56 exits so far at Our Crowd. And several of them, major unicorns, such as Beyond Meat in alternative meat, the guys who make the best tasting, plant-based burger. a company called Lemonade, which is not a food tech company, but an insurance company, as well as Uber. We sold a company early to Uber called Jump Bikes. So we got their shares before they went public. So these are, household names. But many people, like your viewers, will ask themselves, how do I get into that before it gets public, right? How do I, I don't want to buy in at a 5 billion or 10 billion. Now, sometimes that's a good transaction if the company becomes an Apple or a, Google and is worth $1 trillion. Not a bad trade. But how do I get in when it's a 10 million or 20 million or $50 million entity and ride it to becoming $1 billion, getting that, what we call the 10x sort of threshold in venture capital? And for most people, it's been a closed gate. They literally, if you didn't know somebody who was really well connected, a family member or whatnot, you could read about it and sort of drool and think about it, but it wasn't reality. So we set up Our Crowd to create a platform digitally where you go to ourcrowd.com. You have to be what's called in America an accredited investor, which means you have to have $1 million of assets outside of your primary dwelling, or you have to have a $200,000 annual income. Now, it turns out that there are about 14 million households in America that meet that criteria, which means America is absolutely a prospering country with a lot of blessing from on high.
Probably because of Judeo-Christian roots, which we'll talk about. But before we get to that, what is the minimal investment today of an accredited investor?
In Our Crowd, it's $10,000.
Okay, so still $10,000.
It's still very accessible. Our average investment is considerably more than that. Right. And then we have people who are writing $10 million checks. Yeah. So it's a very democratic platform where you have people who are truly billionaires interacting with wealthy dentists or real estate people or a shopkeeper, right. People who've saved money in their lives, want to be invested in private companies because the growth in private companies is really where the action is in the investment arena.
For me, it's a no-brainer because if I want to invest some money into the Israeli startup scene, which is a good idea, investing money in Israel is a good idea. Diversifying your investments internationally is a good idea. So I'm looking for Israeli startups. Now, I think every other country in the world, the problem in the startup scene is lack of opportunity, where in Israel, it's the opposite. The problem in Israel is too much opportunity. So how do I sift through thousands, tens of thousands of companies to know what I'm looking at and what I should invest in? And I say Our Crowd is a perfect solution because you have 300 people working for you around the clock doing due diligence and finding the best companies.
That's the whole purpose of our platform. Is we first of all, every company that gets accepted on the Our Crowd platform goes through a very, very rigorous set of diligence process. But then more importantly, we have our own skin in the game, right? Every single deal, we as a general partner invest, right? And that's something that all of your listeners need to make sure that they take to heart. I don't care who they invest with. If the person you're investing with isn't investing on the same terms, okay, getting the same deal that you're getting, run. Okay, don't even walk away, run away. Yeah. Okay, so we're quite, that's sort of one of our, ekonot, one of our guiding bedrock principles, which is align your interests with your investors. We take our fees, we take from investors, right? Investors pay us management fees, 2% a year, and then they pay us an upside bonus. So if you invest $1 million and we turn it into 10, God willing, okay, then on that $9 million, we take actually 20% up to the first 5x and then 25%. So we get, richly rewarded for success, but that's what you want, okay? Because we work very hard to find what we think are the best deals out there, and then we not only negotiate the price. Remember, you can't just pick up the phone and call Goldman or Morgan Stanley and say, hey, get me this startup. These are not publicly traded companies. Right. They're private. So we set the table. We either join someone else's round. We're always part of a syndicate of some kind. But we set the prices, negotiate the terms, 14 lawyers in-house, making sure we're protected. And then we start a process of trying to add value to the companies.
I'm so sorry you have to work with 14 lawyers. I can tell you this, though. I can tell you this. 99% of lawyers make a bad name for the rest of us.
Yeah, no, hey, as you know, my son is a lawyer who worked with you at some point.
Right.
And there are good lawyers and there are other kinds of lawyers. But the bottom line is that we then, it's not the end of the process when you make the investment. That's the beginning of the process, because unlike the public market, if you buy Apple or Google stock, no one's expecting you to give advice to the management of these companies. But we, on the other hand, we have to sit on company boards. We do that in about half of our investments, either as an observer or as a full board member. We then need to raise money for the company in subsequent rounds,
right,
which is a huge opportunity, because when you find a company that's got an upward trajectory, you want to not just put money in once, you want to follow your bets, as it were, as the company starts to accelerate. We need to add value by introducing them to partners, to distributors, or to people who will do an OEM relationship. We need to introduce them to banks who will take them public or provide a gateway to an M&A or merger. And so that the amount of work that we do from the moment that we've completed the investment process is enormous.
To make sure it succeeds.
You have to be an activist, okay? Yeah. The people who are activists in Wall Street and public companies are few and far between. In our business, in the venture capital industry, everybody's an activist.
Right. So we would fail our viewers if we don't pivot now, just to talk a little bit about, because the Rise crowd said, we love hearing about innovation, we love hearing about these stories, but it's really interested in kind of the Jewish thought, Hebrew principles behind success. You already mentioned some of them. Don't invest in a company that doesn't have skin in the game, right? Like that's a value. That's something that's a guiding light that you implement in your life. And I'm sure as you were growing up, there were certain things taught to you by rabbis that you've implemented into business. And if you could mention, what are some of those big things that you've seen?
I think that, first of all, you can look in the Torah, in the Bible, 5 books of Moses in particular, to see enormous lessons and guideposts for life today in terms of how it goes. It's when I look at, for example, our forefathers of the Jewish people, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, these 3 were really Renaissance people, okay? They were combinations of spiritual leaders, but they were business people, right? I mean, Abraham was kaved batzon. He was heavy, literally. It's interesting how the language hasn't really changed.
With herds, I think.
He had a lot of herds, okay? He was a military leader, right? He went and, tried to save Lot and saved Lot successfully, rescued him from the 5 kings, okay? He was a great evangelist, okay, in terms of spreading the word of God, okay? He was a great sort of host in terms of having people into his tent, which he was this Renaissance man, this extraordinary person. And his son, Isaac, was a hydrologist. Right. In other words,
digging wells.
He was, he foresaw Israel's expertise in water technology, leading the world. Okay, it comes from Isaac. Jacob, on the other hand, was active in biotechnology. Okay, how did he, get all those striped and speckled,
genetic engineering.
It was early genetic engineering with the help of God.
Yeah.
Okay, and you look at that and you say, wait a minute. So this is really interesting. These people in the Bible, first of all, they're full of flaws. Okay, in other words, they're not perfect, and that anybody who sort of doubts the veracity of the Bible would say, wait a minute. If I was writing a story of my people, an origin story, and I wanted to sort of fake it and make it really, I'm going to write some of these things. I'm going to write about incest in my family, okay, with Tamar and Yehuda. I'm going to,
Or the father of our faith saying his wife is his sister in order to prevent.
None of that's going to happen, okay? That's going to be edited out. But it's there because the picture is of human life and about making choices and about living good lives and serving God and spreading God's word. This is all in the Bible. And part of this is making money and not disparaging wealth, right? Some traditions basically worship poverty, okay? We know them, okay, around the world. We have no issue with wealth, okay? In other words, it's back in the beginning, okay? Right. And you have responsibility when you get wealth. Yeah. You have to give a chunk of it away, okay? And if you don't, you're doing something wrong. You're probably not going to stay wealthy. There are many people who get wealthy and not. I'd love to look at the algorithm and see how many of those people gave the 10% tithing, okay? Right. Because that's a really good way to
do you tithe, by the way?
Of course I do. Every religious Jew does.
Right.
Okay. And
it's just it's one of those principles, right, that you live by.
Now there are questions. Is it 10% after tax?
Right.
Is it 10% before tax? Right. Okay. But
I asked a rabbi
consult your local rabbi.
I asked a rabbi once, do I tithe on my net or tithe on my gross? He said, well, do you want a net blessing or a gross blessing? By the way, I'm not even giving any advice here, but I thought that was cute. And it was interesting. You said this was from the beginning. I saw when I was reading Genesis some years ago that God's creating the heavens and the earth, and at the end of every one he says this is good. And the 8th time he said this is good, what was he talking about? Gold. And the gold of the land was good. So gold is a good thing, right? And this is something probably the Jewish people have understood for centuries, like you said.
Historically, there are other reasons that got involved. I mean, look at Joseph. You can't just start with the first 3. You got to look. Joseph was the classic Jewish business person, yes, politician, government official, great leader who not only saved the Jewish people in terms of providing them with a safe haven in.
He saved the whole Egyptian people.
He saved Egypt, right. Okay, and he did it right. He was quite respectful to the powers that were at the time, okay, and then absolutely demanded from his children and whatnot that they bring him back to his land. Okay, in other words, what a great figure in terms of someone who is loyal to tradition but is modern. Okay, he was this just incredible character.
I hope you don't mind me saying that I think there's something similar to your story and Joseph's story, or our crowd and Joseph's story, because saving Egypt, right? So when you're investing in all these technologies that are tackling the greatest crises facing humanity and fighting diseases and saving lives and making life better and for so many people around the world, that's like almost a calling.
First of all, it's part of our responsibility. Our tradition believes very much that creation didn't stop after 6 days. Right? In other words, God created the world in 6 days, rested on the 7th. Right. And some people, I think, mistakenly understand that it's over. Okay? All the wisdom in the world, everything was done. Okay, no. Okay, the way we relate to it is that we have to complete the world. Tikkun olam, it's fixing the world. It's probably not, it's help to complete. It's about the fact that we are partners with God in creation. Okay, every time babies are born, this is creation, every time.
And Israel's doing a lot of that.
Oh my gosh,
we're off the charts in the OECD.
We're
3.5 kids.
But it's a family society. It's about believing in the future.
Yeah.
It's somehow disregarding all these dystopian visions, of the world coming to an end. Okay, it's making sure that it doesn't. Right? In other words, you can't just sit back, right? One of my favorite parts of the Bible are when God chastises Moshe for just praying. Right. Praying is good, but get on with it. He said, he's at the Red Sea and he's praying. He said, lead, do something.
You have a staff in your hands.
Okay, how did things start to happen is when, Nachshon ben Aminadav got into the water up to his neck. And that's when the waters split, okay? In other words, you have to act, and there's this bias for action and for engaging with the real world in a holy and positive way. Okay, taking everyday things and making them part of godliness. Yes. Okay, which is a very Jewish, very Hasidic, if you will, in terms of collecting sparks and things. But it's just so important. And today I feel very much that what investors with our crowd and outside of our crowd are doing in terms of backing companies that are working on green hydrogen, for example, or fusion. We've made investments in perhaps the leading American. We don't just invest, by the way, in Israeli companies. We're right now about 50% of our investments are here in Israel. About 50% are outside of Israel, because we want to take a global view, and we believe that creating this network with Jerusalem at its headquarters is that's our mission.
But the grid is some innovation for good, would you say? Even the companies that are in the United States?
More than anything else. I mean, I would say, if you look at it's called impact investing, social impact. I would say that at least half of our companies, meet some kind of an impact standard. So we're invested in fusion. We're invested in green hydrogen.
What is fusion? I don't even know. I know jazz fusion. It's great.
It's pretty cool music.
So how is fusion helping the world?
Fusion is a clean, safe kind of nuclear energy. Okay. Then instead of a fission reaction, it's a fusion reaction. And we just participated in the largest fusion round, which was a $1.8 billion round of investment in a company called Commonwealth Fusion Systems. And
when the fusion vis-a-vis the fission, it's less detrimental to the environment.
There's virtually no waste. There's no danger. It won't blow up. Okay, it's the future. Very hard to pull off. Okay, we're talking about really big science, and there are many companies going after it. But what's cool about what we're doing is that we're investing alongside Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Michael Bloomberg, some of the biggest investors in the world. And now somebody can come join our crowd and get on the same terms, right? In other words, and that's what's democratic about this, is that it used to be that these deals were really, the province of a very, very elite group of good people generally, I think. I'm quite fond of many of these people, but you weren't invited if you're from Peoria, you've worked all your life and saved a few $1 million and you'd like to now invest. Now you can do so. We have a company called H2 Pro, which is doing green hydrogen, right? Which is hydrogen from water, okay? And it's just unbelievable how important that is. And we're invested also with a huge group of important investors. But it's not just that, it's in food. We have a company called Remilk, which is creating milk protein from cells in bioreactors, basically to grow milk, no cow. So it's not plant alternative where you take, we have a company doing that too called Ripple Foods in America, where you can go to your market. It's like Oatly, but ours is made from pea protein, tastes better, we think, and it's doing very well. But no, this is actually, using sort of biotechnology to create milk without the cow. And you should be aware of how important this is to global warming. They estimate that something close to 10% of greenhouse gases are coming from the dairy industry. Right. I mean, it's just a huge, and all of a sudden you can get rid of that, and there's no, and we think that this will ultimately actually provide, and I've tasted it, tastes great, okay, and it will, I think, not only create a great tasting and healthy and no lactose intolerance issues and things like that, but will be a huge impact, on the planet. We have another company called Blue Green Water Technologies, who are mitigating toxic algal blooms. So, there's this algae that becomes toxic that grows in rivers and lakes all over the world, but particularly in America. And so this company, for example, has been cleaning up lakes and rivers in Florida, such as Lake Okeechobee, a major sort of, important lake for the Everglades and whatnot. Governor Ron DeSantis had seen the company on a visit here.
But what would be the business model for something like that?
They get paid a ton of money to get rid of this stuff.
From local governments? From
local governments, because this is not only poisoning the water and killing aquatic life, but it's making the water unsafe for humans. Yeah. So many of these lakes are posted no swimming or what, so you think about this, you say, okay, wait a minute, I can clean up the environment, I can provide clean energy, I can provide new sources of food, I can improve farmers' yields. We have a ton of companies using satellites and small miniature spectrometers to gain ag data, which will improve the ability to feed the growing planet. There's so much work to be done. So when I wake up in the morning, and I've got a lot on my plate, part of this is just so cool. And I'll tell you the part that really gets me going is the healthcare stuff. Because we see lives of people who we literally have saved through our technology. We have a company called Insight Tech that takes care of Parkinson's tremor. And so you'll meet somebody who you'll see the pictures of them where they could not literally hold a glass of water without spilling it. And they get into this machine, takes a couple of seconds, and zap, no more tremor. Okay, we've had them at our summit, which God willing will come back next year, face to face.
Give me some wood.
Amen to that. We have, companies that are like Alpha Tau, who are using radioactive darts to blow the heck out of solid tumors, so much so that they totally destroy them and they hardly affect the surrounding tissue. So you get, the most powerful anti-cancer effect without the collateral damage.
It's amazing. I want to zero in on something you said. You mentioned democratizing, and what you're doing is really democratizing investment. You're opening it up to the general public instead of keeping it all for a small few. And I think there's a pretty good case to be made that democracy didn't start with the Greco-Roman empires. I've heard many rabbis talk about, for instance, Micha Goodman. I don't know if he's a rabbi, but he's an Israeli philosopher. He wrote a good book on Deuteronomy, and I think it's in Deuteronomy 17 that says, when you come to the land, you'll appoint a king, and this is what it'll look like. He won't have many wives, won't have many horses, won't have much gold. And what that was the limitation of his diplomatic powers, because you had many wives in order to make peace with other kingdoms. Limitation of his military powers, not many horses. Limitation of he's not like all the economic power in the land. No, he's a civil servant who's going to serve the people, And then there was this ceremony where he had to stand before the priests and write down all the words of the law. So there's a separation of religion and state. And you say, wait a second, limited powers, separation of religion and state. These are things that are really based, if you say that the roots of democracy, which I think there's no question today, the capitalistic democracy is the best form of human flourishing, right? We've discovered that. It might not be utopia, but it's the best thing we've come up with.
There is a strong, tie with that. I mean, you look at, and again, it's part of the nature that the Bible has such a rich, a picture of human life. My sons, when they want to tell me, Dad, to delegate more, that I'm doing too much and keeping too much on my own plate, they'll say, look, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe our rabbi, is told by Jethro, to go, delegate.
Right.
Okay, it's right there.
You have tens and hundreds. And
absolutely. Okay, and it's interesting that the way that we relate to the Bible and the fact that we talk about it every week in terms of a Parshat HaShavua, or the portion of the week. We go through the annual cycle to read the entire 5 books. It makes your interaction with, these are more than stories. These are sort of your extended family, literally. And whether you're born into the tribe or you have joined the tribe, it doesn't matter. They are your family, who you relate to, who are there sort of sitting at the table, either physically or, on Passover when we set a chair for Elijah, or put a cup, of wine, which I was certain growing up every time it was down. I don't know who had the task in our family to lighten that cup, but I said, where did that wine go? But the bottom line is that it's just it's a cool thing, and it's cool to be here in the country of Israel, where there's thousands of years of our history, where we are somehow in between this future, which we're helping as much as anybody in the planet to create, but being nourished by the past. Okay, and I think that that's perhaps the biggest lesson you can take, from Israeli and Jewish innovation, which is that you can embrace the future. We must embrace the future. We must develop technology, but we don't do so by abnegating or canceling, God forbid, the past, right? In other words, we're informed by the past. We're enriched by our past. We're going to need help in terms of figuring out the moral pitfalls of this incredible power we're going to get from artificial intelligence and robotics. Okay, we're going to need to have rabbis and other religious leaders help inform this new, brave new world, because it's coming. And in order to avoid the sort of dystopian reality, we're going to need that wisdom from the past being brought into harmony with it.
Yeah, that's so well said. And I want to just thank you for your inspiring, first of all, for just what you do is wonderful for Israel and wonderful for the investors. By the way, every investor that I've ever referred to our crowd or recommended that they invest in our crowd have been very happy.
Thank God.
And it's worked out successfully for them. So yes, thank God and thank you. And and just thank you for coming here and being a part of the Arise Summit. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
My great-grandfather, Abraham Myers, was a Jewish businessman from Darmstadt, Germany. Unfortunately, Darmstadt was the first city that was boycotted by the Third Reich when they were calling to boycott all Jewish-owned businesses in order to cripple the economy of this community. We created Arise to make sure that that will never happen again. As anti-Semitic voices are rising once again around the world, and there's even this insidious campaign calling to boycott Israel, boycott Israeli companies, to isolate our economy, we want to do the opposite. We invite you to join our alliance and to help us by standing against these lies, spreading the truth about Israel, combating anti-Semitism, and creating more connectedness between the Israeli economy and the international community, which will just create security for Israel's future. Please sign up today to become a member of the Arise Alliance. Thank you so much. So many of you will remember former member of Knesset, Yehuda Glick, who spoke at our last conference, and has just an amazing story. He's the only person that I know personally that was shot in the chest several times at point blank. And if you remember from our summit, we actually talked to the medic who saved his life through amazing Israeli technology and innovation. And you're a living miracle, Yehuda. And more importantly for this conversation, you're a rabbi. Today we're talking about Jewish principles and ancient wisdom for success in business and life. You're the founder of the Shalom Jerusalem Foundation, which is working together Christians and Jews and maybe people from other monotheistic faiths working together for the good of Jerusalem and the good of the world. But now you also have co-founded with your wife the Israeli Association for Widows and Orphans, which I think is amazing. And it's amazing to see you doing so many things now that you're out of politics. Our late President and Prime Minister Shimon Peres said, politicians make problems, business people find solutions. I'm sure you'd agree with that. But maybe tell us a little bit about what you're doing today with the widows and orphans. I know James and the Apostle James, the writer in the New Testament, said that true religion. Yeah. Dealing with the Christians, with the widows and orphans. So tell us how you made this transition from crazy political life to what you're doing today.
So the truth is, as you all see, God pulls the strings and He takes us to different places. I remarried 3 years ago, and a little more than 3 years ago, to my wife, present wife Hadass, who was a widow for 17 years. And she raised her 4 children alone. And we found that in Israel, or just almost like the rest of almost all over the world, young widows and orphans are pretty much forgotten. And the Bible repeats again and again the obligation not to forget them. The only time a person has to come to the temple and say to God, I did not forget is about the widows and orphans. It appears in Deuteronomy 26. You come and stand in the temple and say, I do not forget the widows and orphans. And what happens is that usually young widows and orphans, we're talking about orphans, we're talking about widows and widowers who are raising young children, ages up to 14, all by themselves. And it's not like when divorced, you have two parents, so they like divide the time. But here is a family that prepared to live and a dream to build a family with children and grandchildren, and suddenly it stopped in the middle. It could be cancer, heart attack, anything. And this widow or widower has to cope by herself, and raise the children by themselves. So what we are doing is actually empowering the surviving parent. Usually in the world, when we talk about orphans, the widows, they say, oh, you're dealing with an orphanage. But no, it's called Amitzim. It's an acronym, Almanot Yitomim Tzirim, which means Young Widows and Orphans. The Organization for Young Widows and Orphans, Amitzim.
And the acronym means courage.
It means courage, exactly.
Yeah.
Chazak ve'emat. And this is the whole idea is giving them courage. What happens is, when you take a child out of it and send them into an orphanage, you're actually killing the surviving parent once again. Parents are there to serve as a protection for their children, as empowerment to the children. When one parent is gone, we have to make sure the surviving parent doesn't collapse also. So what we do, we have centers around the country. We have like 3 centers right now, one in Jerusalem, Afula, Petach Tikva, where they come and they meet and we give them activity. Aside from that, we have volunteers who go into the houses and help them. The whole concept, we say the best thing you can do for a child is to give him a strong parent. Yeah. Because nobody can replace the parent. And the one who knows best for the child is the parent. What we can do, empower the surviving parent. And that's what we're doing. We come and we as I said, we have volunteers going to the houses. We bring enjoyment to the houses. Every orphaned kid who has a birthday, begins first grade, we bring and we celebrate it. We celebrate birthdays. We bring them Hanukkah gifts. But also, we don't bring food, or we don't refer to them as poor. We give them the dignity. This is what Hashem tells us. Support them, make them happy. Yeah. We go into the houses. We don't leave the house until the walls of the house are dancing.
And these are widows and orphans from every sector of Israeli society?
Every sector, all. We have ultra-Orthodox, we have totally secular, from I would say, from the Israeli Beverly Hills, Savion and Kisaria and Ramat Aviv, and from the Israeli Harlem or whatever, we have Ethiopian kids, and we have from Shchonat Tikva, because the death angel doesn't know how to differentiate between people. So when he comes and he brings an illness, or he brings a car accident, or he brings whatever it is, the families are in the same need. When they need financial help, that's something else. But we have psychologists, we have pedagogical help, and we do whatever we can to surround them and embrace them so that the surviving parent stays strong.
This is beautiful. Now, one Jewish principle, or principle from the Torah, that our community talks about a lot, both Jews and Christians, is tithing. Right? Exactly. So, most of the people listening to us today give a tenth of their income. Some tithe on the gross, some tithe on the net. If you have an opinion about that, I'd be happy to hear. But I think if you're looking, I'll say this to our crowd, if you're looking for an important thing to give your tithe to, look for this organization. We'll help connect you to Rabbi Yehuda Glick and the Widows and Orphans in Israel, because I think this is an amazing thing.
This is what the Torah tells. The Torah says, repeats it again and again, the orphan and the widow. 15 times in the Torah itself, it meant the orphan and the widow. And the interesting thing is, it never mentions the orphan or the widow alone. It's the orphan and the widow. Not strengthening an orphanage, but strengthening the connection, the linkage between the widow and the orphan. Because we know also, I always say that I dealt with the same thing before. I dealt with Jerusalem. Jerusalem, in Jeremiah's words in Lamentation, is compared to a widow. Not because of the poverty, but the loneliness. The fact that she's forgotten. We know that Elisha tells this widow that comes over to him, she says, so what do you have in your house? He says to her, hey, what do you have in your house? How can I help you? He said, I only have an empty jar of oil. What does he say to her? Everybody remembers. He says, go pour it in vessels and fill it up and it'll be a miracle. That's not what he tells her. He says, go to the neighbors. And she doesn't go to the neighbors. Because this is the problem. Or widows, they never ask for help. They're always ashamed. And our obligation is to go in there and bring the happiness to the family, to strengthen the orphan and the widow. And this is why, as you said, James says that the true religion, but the Torah itself repeats again and again. Not only do you give them support, make them happy, sustain them, make sure they are there and not forgotten. This is the concept. And don't compare them to the poor, compare them to the Levite. Compare them to give them dignity, give them strength, because if they are honored, then they'll be strong, and their children will honor them.
So what you're doing, you're strengthening a family. You're
strengthening families.
You're strengthening families,
Exactly.
which I think is also just comes from Jewish wisdom, right? Like, so there's many cultures around the world where business people say, well, I have to put my business and my career first, and the family I see on weekends, or something like that, you know? But I think that if you want to live a truly fulfilled life, family is first, and then business.
God created us. The first community we had was you cling to your wife and you leave your father and your mother. The second, when God blesses Abraham, people remember this. I'll bless you. Those who bless you will be blessed. What's the purpose? You should serve as the source of blessing to the families of the earth. It doesn't say to the nations, to the families, of the concept of family, the concept of remembering, because the family, a person is not a solitaire. It's not quarantine. A person it needs a community. The first community that can give us strength is the family. And I always tell our orphans and widows when they come to our centers, we tell them, you know what I want you to do to celebrate? Your husband or your wife passed away, unfortunately, your spouse. You know what I want you to celebrate? Not his Memorial Day, I'm sure you can do it. Not his birthday. You know what the most important day? The anniversary. We think anniversary is a day of couplehood. No. It's the day the family was born. God created man in his image. We can create families. When we marry, that day, the family, this new family was born. Now, even if unfortunately the deceased parent passed away, the family is still there. Yeah. Strengthen the family. Yeah. So that when we're rebuilding Jerusalem, what are we doing? We're taking the covenant that's still there, and we're taking the present reality, and we're trying to strengthen it. The same thing. We take a family. The love is there. The covenant is there. The base is there. The foundations are there. The tenets are there. Strengthen them. And strengthen the concept of family. This is the most important thing we can do to a parent, to a spouse, and to a child.
That's very interesting. I heard a rabbi ask the question one time, why did God chose Abraham? Why did God choose Abraham? Why was he chosen to be the father of our faith, right? And then he goes to, if I'm not mistaken, Genesis 18:18, that says, I chose him because I found a man who would teach his sons and his household the ways of righteousness and justice.
Righteousness and justice.
So I found a family man.
Tzedakah u'mishpat.
Right, but it's right. Tzedakah u'mishpat, which is beautiful. But I found a family man, someone who will teach his sons. And then obviously we have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the story goes on.
And all the history of Judaism goes through the family. Passover, we sit around the table, family. The whole concept of our strengthening of our identity goes through family. And unfortunately, today we're living at a time where family is at stake. Whether it's the communist world who tried to teach everybody we're all one big collective, or it's the liberal family of the world that's kind of telling you that everybody's individual, you don't need a family. The Torah tells us that the basic concept is the sanctity of the family. There's nothing more holy in this world than family. And a person who goes to work and becomes enslaved to his work and forgets his family, he's missing out so much. And we have to strengthen the concept of family. And this is the blessing that Abraham will bring to the world.
So, but even the concept that children are a blessing. I mean, you're right that people have in different societies. You know, China made their one-child policy, and the communists tried to do the same thing. But today, scientific evidence says that a nation that has a negative birth rate, at the end of the day, their economy will shrink. You cannot grow an economy with a negative birth rate. You have to import maybe foreign workers from somewhere else in the world, but it's very connected to economic success.
People are asking you, what's the best investment? Family is the first investment. More children is the biggest investment. You're opening a world business here. You're opening every person contributes to the world. Every person together, partnership is always 1 + 1 is way more than 2. A family who partners together and it creates something new in this world is the best investment you can do in the world. And I think that we see in Israel today, Israel is flourishing economically, and our birth rate in Israel is of the highest in the world.
Yeah.
And
Highest
by the
in
way,
the OECD, it's like 3.5 children per household or something.
well, we just came back from Estonia, and people were there's the ex-minister of population. She was actually complaining and crying about that. She says, "I don't know why people aren't bringing children. We need families, and the family value." Which, as I said before, the first community God created for man. Man was alone. And God said, it can't be that way. Man cannot be alone. Let me create his best partner. And when man sees his wife, he says, wow, this is the moment. And that moment is something we have to strengthen. And the way to strengthen it is family, because family teaches you to move yourself a little aside, to allow place for sanctity, to allow place for others. Doing this is also the secret of success in business as well. If you think you have everything and you know everything, you're gonna make mistakes. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, there are so many reasons in business to give up. There's so many times we say, no, oh no, it's not going this way. And family gives you strength and hope to continue. So in both ways, first of all, the empowerment and the teaching you of humble, modest behavior, and at the same time, not to lose hope at moments of distress.
So I mean, this is an amazing message. But let's say I'm a typical corporate workaholic. Okay, there's something inside of me that drives me and says, well, every hour I can spend another hour, whether it's the law firm or the office or whatever, I'm going to be better off financially, and I'm going to work 7 hours a day, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, etc. And I'm listening to you, Rabbi Yehuda Glick, and thinking, oh my goodness, I should make some readjustments if I really want to flourish. What are some of the baby steps I could take as a business person to be a better family man, to invest more in my home, in my marriage, etc.?
I think that this is what the Torah teaches us again and again. We have the Shabbat. What does the Shabbat mean? It means stop a second, rest a second, hold your breath for a second, change the pace of your life for one day a week. The idea you mentioned before of tithe. Tithe is not just like giving my tax. Tithe is something that educates a person. Educates a person that not only don't be enslaved to what you own, but also don't take everything for granted. Know how to admire and know how to recognize the fact that everything you receive is a present from God. Know how to understand that what you're doing is something. And we see in the Bible, when you begin your work, you give something out. That's the first fruits. When you finish eating a meal, you say your grace to God. Every point where you stop for a second, it's never been proved that a person who works around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, makes more money and is more successful than somebody who works only 16 hours a day and only 6 days a week. The concept is, yes, concentrate on what make planning. We know that the best thing for a person can do is plan. Planning, the same thing as planning your time, and understanding that family is part of your success. And I'll say beyond that, of course, if you can do it together. I really have discovered working together with my wife is the best thing that's happened to me in my life. And I think that it's the best partner. It's a partner you can trust all the time. It's a partner you know that you can have a common goal in life that you both want each of you to succeed. And these are issues that are much more important than how many hours you spend. And it does something for the soul. It does something and you know how to enjoy the money that you make.
And many people who watch this wouldn't know all the nuances of rabbinic Judaism and talking about turning off all your technology on Shabbat, because the big question is, well, how do I keep Shabbat? Now, it seems that, in ancient times, you used to work out in the sun and in nature and you'd sweat so it's obvious that this was your disconnect from that toil, that manual toil, right? And kind of the thing that disconnected us from that manual toil is technology, because now, right, it can be sunlight 24 hours a day if you turn the light on, or it can be
You're also connected 24 hours a day to the world. You can nonstop.
And you have air conditioning and you have everything else. And so it has set us free in a sense from just being part of a cycle of nature. But at the same time, the thing that set us free from the cycle of nature can become itself, it can enslave us and become a master, right? So I understand in Orthodox communities, like you turn off your cell phone on Shabbat.
Everything. We don't do the cell phone, the computer.
And you survive.
And not only we survive, we learn to talk to each other. We learn to see each other. We sit around the table, and we listen to each other, and we sing together, and we strengthen the core of our values, the core of our sanctity, and the core of our family. And I think this is something that empowers. And every week, there's always an argument: is Shabbat at the beginning of the next week, or the conclusion of the last week? And it's definitely both. It definitely helps you stop a second and look back at what happened this week, and prepare, give you strength for the upcoming week. And I think that's so important. Everybody who runs a business knows you have to do it for your workers also. Once in a while, collect gather them all together and talk to them, listen to them, and stop for a second.
Gives you perspective. You can breathe. You can stop. You get
perspective. Not only perspective, it gives you breathing on the highest level, spiritual level of what taking a fresh breath means.
Yeah. So I'm not Orthodox, not ultra Orthodox, but I did several years ago. I said, you know what? My business is based on emails. I'm in the email generation. Probably my children will be the WhatsApp or the TikTok generation. I don't know.
Everything you do is already new, old.
But before the sun goes down on Friday night, I disconnect my cell phone from the email server. Wow. I cannot see an email on Shabbat. And I'll tell you what, it's been it's just been a good practice. I feel like my batteries are re-energized, my family, so I can concentrate on my family and my children. I have that space. You make marginal space so you can live a better life and the way we were created to do.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem. I think that when families grow, it's also your children move out and they have the concept of calling you before Shabbat, and then that's also timing once a week. You know that even if you didn't speak to one of your children for a few days before Shabbat, they do it. It's also something that I learned from my parents. My parents, Baruch Hashem, are celebrating this summer their 90th birthday with 46 grandchildren. And
you still talk to them every
125 great-grandchildren. And they're right now waiting because 3 of their great-grandchildren are married. So hopefully, who knows, soon they may be celebrating a birth of a great-great-grandchild. But the idea of family and we get together and we make sure.
The picture of your family, in my opinion, is a picture of a successful person. You want to be a successful business person? May you have 120 great-grandchildren. I mean, that's like our father Abraham, who had family
and look, just 2-3 generations ago, the Jewish people, we lost so many of our people.
Yeah.
And the fact that we are here, back in our independent country, in our home, in our national home, and flourishing, and our families are the best happiness. And if you ask me, one of the explanations of my parents' health and elderly age is thanks to the great-grandchildren and the grandchildren and the family. There's nothing that gives them strength and more than that. And I think that's what the whole secret of Shabbat is, and that's what the secret of family is.
How many grandchildren do you have, by the way?
11.
So those are 11 of their great-grandchildren.
Those are 11 of their great-grandchildren. Yeah, we're 6 children. My family, my parents.
And together with your wife now?
I have 8 children, but my wife has 4 children.
Wow, so that's 12 together.
Yeah, that's 12 together.
Wow,
but,
amazing. Ashrecha.
But I don't count my wife's 4 children, my parents' grandchildren out there.
Yeah.
If I would count that, numbers would grow. But Baruch Hashem, we are definitely very successful. All our children are actually out of the house. They're on their own. Some of them are married, some of them are not, but on the way. But the concept of family is something that I really admire, that I received from my parents, and it's something that we received from the Torah. It's so important to see and to watch, on the one hand, how every one of your children develops independently, at the same time, how every one of them takes core values that you have transferred to them, not by demanding, not by forcing, not by coercion, but just by talking, just by developing trust. This happens on Friday night, on Shabbat. It happens in Pesach. It happens when a family is a strong family.
And what kind of active role do you take in teaching your values and your faith to your children and your grandchildren? What does that look like? That's something a lot of people would say, okay, how do I do that exactly? How do I, these wonderful, even the emphasis on family and so on and so forth. What do you do to transfer that on to the next generation?
Just like I said before about the widows and orphans, the most important thing is to strengthen the concept of parent. When my grandchildren come over to me for the weekend for Shabbat, they always get to know that, first of all, how lucky they are that they have the best parents in the world. And secondly, they always know that they can't use me to overcome their parents. Their parents decide for them. Whether I agree with their parents or not, I don't know. This is the only parents they have. And if the child tries, anything I do will be to strengthen their parents. That, wow, you're so lucky that he's your father. But why don't you go ask him what he says? Maybe he'll think it's a good idea. If he says it's a good idea, I'll be happy to do it. And always to strengthen the family. And it happens all the way. I honor my parents because I saw my parents honoring each other. My children will honor me if they see me honoring my spouse. And my grandchildren will honor their parents if they see me honoring their parents. It's all part of them. That's, by the way, in the Ten Commandments, honoring your parent is part of honoring God, because the source of blessing we receive from God goes through parents. That's the way it is in the world. And we have an obligation to strengthen the status of the parent in the eyes of his children.
That's amazing. So what do you do if you have difficult parents that aren't always easy to communicate in some sort of way? How do you honor them? I mean, I'm asking you as a rabbi, right? I mean, a lot of these are questions that a lot of our people would have.
These are questions that we all have. I've never met a person who never had any kind of issue with his parents. Right. But these are the parents, and these are our parents. And this is the blessing that God...
honoring, even if they're difficult, honoring them may be for you calling them once a week to make sure they're healthy and everything's fine, and to talk to them and so on.
First of all, if you honor your parent, it'll usually come back to you in the best way. You won't lose from giving honor to your parents, even if you're... And now, we can't educate our parents. We can't change our parents. Our job is to educate our children, and they're also it doesn't go so easily as we want. It doesn't always go the way we want. Our obligation, and the Torah talks about it, is honoring your parent, because they are the source of blessing. They're the source of blessing from the very moment, or before, when they were carrying you in their womb. They're the source of blessing when they brought you and did whatever they could to raise you. Every parent. I'm not talking about somebody when the situation is really radical to a situation, but in a normal situation, the parent wants his child to succeed, wants his child to be the best. Okay, your parent could have made mistakes, could have not made mistakes. The idea is that they are the representative of God here in the world. God decided that they are your parents. They are your representatives. So in any way you can, to respect them and to teach your children what the concept of respecting parents is so important. It's so basic.
Wow, that's amazing.
I think that if you want to know the secret is family, 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 and especially this generation where the things are falling apart, we have to talk up about it, and we will be a source of blessing to all the families of the earth.
I love that, and I love the fact that you have not only been an exemplary father for your parents, and a husband, and a son, or for your children, and then a son for your parents, but also now that you are being the hands of God to be a father to the fatherless, and that's something that's really
He is the father of the fatherless.
Yeah.
Their surviving parent is the surviving parent. We are here to strengthen the surviving parent. Yeah. I'm not a father of the fatherless. God is the father of the fatherless, and strengthening the surviving parent.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. I hope Hashem loves it also. That's what we're trying to do. We do it because we believe that that's what Hashem wants us to do.
Yeah. And I just want to encourage our people again that if you're looking for a good place to send your tithe, you're looking for a good organization to support in Israel, what a beautiful story. The Israeli Association for Widows and Orphans.
Young Widows and Orphans.
Young Widows and Orphans.
Yeah.
Amitzim. Anyway, you can find Rabbi Yehuda Glick through our website. We'll put his information in this video. And yeah, thank you for coming. And
thank you so much, Kalev, for all you're doing. And I want to wish every one of the people watching us today success, also in family, also in personal, but in your activities, in your work, in your businesses, in your interpreters, whatever you're doing, God should put his blessing upon you healthily, psychologically, and overcome all challenges in the best way.
Thank you. There are many small businesses in Israel that are creating amazing products that never make it to the shelves of the stores where you shop. Unfortunately, there's an insidious campaign growing around the world calling to boycott Israel. And these small business owners see their potential market shrinking from day to day. What can we do about this? So Arise exists to make meaningful connections between friends like you in the international community and the economy of Israel. When you sign up to become a member of the Arise Alliance, we will send you on a quarterly basis a gift box filled with cosmetic products, culinary products, fashion products, amazing stuff made in Israel. Your family's gonna love this. Your favorite time every quarter is gonna be to stand around and discover what did you receive this quarter from Israel. And it's just a great way to weave Israeli products and the reality of Israel into your everyday life. Make sure you become a member today and help support small businesses and create jobs in Israel. Thank you. So Rabbi Daniel Lapin, it's such a pleasure to have you at the Arise Summit. And since we've invited you to this, I started listening to your weekly podcast, which I've gotten a lot out of. It's fantastic. And first of all, I want to say to everyone who's watching this Arise Summit to go to Rabbi Daniel Lapin's podcast. It's fantastic. And Rabbi Lapin, I think I could start to refer to you as my rabbi now that I'm being edified by you spiritually on a week-to-week basis.
Well, thank you very much indeed. It's kind of you to say so. I very much enjoy doing that weekly podcast, and I try to deliver value.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And at this summit this year, we also have John Medved, who's talking a little bit about, some Jewish principles and wisdom for doing business. And he also said that you're his rabbi as well. So I feel like I'm in good company. I listened to two ongoing people through podcasts. One is Jordan Peterson, and one is you. And I find Jordan Peterson tackles issues at a very deep philosophical level, and then you come and give a very practical perspective and make them easy to implement. I feel like a lot of what you're talking about is similar, and it's been a huge encouragement in my life.
Yeah, no, Jordan is terrific, and I'm a big fan of his book, his 12 Principles, and yes, I mean he is an academic, which I'm not, and so it's two different perspectives. But I hope both useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of books, I got a hold of your "Thou Shalt Prosper," 10 Commandments for Success in Business. I hope I'm getting the title right. I got a hold of it probably around 10 years ago and just loved it. I read it a few times and actually had the honor of and privilege of teaching it with your permission, if you remember. Yeah, and so many people got a lot out of that. So maybe that's just a good starting place. Why would you as an Orthodox rabbi choose to write a book which helps people do a better job at managing money and doing business?
There were two main reasons. The first is that I found myself from about 91, 92, somewhere around about that point, I found myself being invited to address many Christian audiences. And that was the result of an earlier book I had written called America's Real War, in which I laid down the hypothesis that America is unquestionably a divided nation. However, I insisted then that it was not divided between rich and poor, or between black and white, or between men and women, but that it was divided between those who saw Bible-based Judeo-Christian values as vital for the nation's survival. And on the other hand, those who believed that Bible-based Judeo-Christian values were primitive obstructions to what they saw as progress. And there were blacks and whites on both sides, and men and women on both sides, and rich and poor on both sides. And I argued that that was the fundamental canyon that cuts through American culture. And I think events have proven that to be correct. Nobody on the left in America could believe that in 2016, Donald Trump obtained so many positive votes from African American people. But that just emphasizes my point. Anyway, that book became very popular indeed, and it remains very popular. But what it did, it put me in front of large Christian audiences, which for an Orthodox Jewish rabbi was an extremely bizarre experience, I can tell you. The very first time was at the Hilton Towers ballroom in Washington, D.C. I remember it as if it was yesterday. And it was 6,000 members of an organization called the Christian Coalition. And needless to say, I had prepared very carefully my speech. And when I was introduced and went up to the podium, the applause took about 15 or 20 seconds to die down. And when you're standing at the podium, 20 seconds is a long time. And I just had this moment of divine intuition where I really felt I was being told to be smart here. And I said, ladies and gentlemen, I have tossed away little notes of everything I was intending to say today. And I want to start off a completely unprepared speech by telling you what my grandfather would say if he knew that his grandson was in a room with 6,000 Christians.
Right.
And I waited for 5 seconds, which also felt like a long time. And the room was absolutely quiet. And I cupped my hands to the microphone and I said, "Run for your life." And I said, well, times have changed. And it's very, very different. It's now that I share many more values in common, not theological, but practical life values in common with you, much more than I would in common with many people who are part of the American Jewish community, which is an astonishing thing to have said back in '92. But at any rate, that was the reality. So in answer to your question, as people around the country and later the world got to know me, they felt more comfortable asking me questions that bothered them, but which they felt were politically incorrect. They may be questions that betray an inherent bigotry. The most important of these is very simple, and that is, why are Jews disproportionately good with money? That's the question they wanted to ask.
And it's not just in Israel, it's everywhere in the world.
In the 1800s already, it was very noticeable in that Mark Twain, the great American novelist and journalist, wrote this observation. In the early 1900s, Winston Churchill did. And then there are writers in Livorno, Italy, which had a big Jewish population in the early days, in the 1600s, the 1700s. And again, it was noted then too that it's not to say there were no poor Jews. However, a much higher proportion of Jews were living comfortable, affluent lives than could be said of the general population.
That's very interesting. Before we move on to this book, just in response to your first point, I've often said within the Israeli context, as an Israeli citizen, that our best leaders and prime ministers are people who viewed our nation as within a biblical narrative or a biblical story, let's say as a fulfillment of biblical prophecy, right? Whether it's, David Ben-Gurion, who actually called the modern state of Israel the third kingdom, because this is the second time we've come back from dispersion, or Bibi Netanyahu, who stood before the United Nations and will quote the prophet Isaiah, etc. I think that they've been the best people for managing the affairs of our nation, and then so you have the same divide in Israel, that you have in the United States. But coming to your second book, I'm a business person, and I want to receive advice about managing my affairs in a better way. You are a Jewish rabbi. You're not Bill Gates. You're not Warren Buffett. Why should I ask you? Is it because I should be interested because I see the success in Jewish business people around me, and I want to know what are the secrets behind what they're doing?
Well, yes, and what you say is absolutely correct. I'm maybe not be as interesting as Bill Gates or Warren Buffett. I'm certainly not as smart as they are.
I don't listen to their podcast. I listen to your podcast.
High IQ individuals, but I am probably more useful because I don't think Bill Gates. Again, with all due credit to Bill Gates, a lot of stars just lined up right. His mother was a board of directors member of IBM, which was then the dominant computer company in the world. And his dad was an international and prominent lawyer. And he came of age on the cusp of the computer revolution. Most people who drop out of university do not become billionaires. Bill Gates did, and it was for a lot of reasons that don't apply to you and me. And so in that sense, for ordinary people, using the principles of 3,000 years of Jewish tradition is more reliable because they've been white Jews and black Jews, and they've been brilliant, smart Jews, and they've been average intelligence Jews, and there's been men and women Jews, and everybody, all of them, have benefited from this accumulation of ancient Jewish wisdom, which has so much to say about money.
Which I think is important because there's still, in many societies, even traveling out east, people seem to believe that there's some kind of Jewish conspiracy, that we behind the scenes are pulling the strings and helping each other because we control the banks and the finance. And there are all these stories floating around. If they only knew how much we actually don't help each other.
No, it's tragic. I wish all those stories were true. But anybody who has experienced synagogue politics knows the truth.
Right, exactly. So it's not because of that. And you mentioned IQ. I assume that we would probably be, Jewish people are probably average, the international median. Would that be correct regarding IQ?
I think of Sam Walton, who created Walmart, one of the largest companies in the world. Sam Walton was just like most of us, in the middle of that bell curve of intelligence distribution. Where are the people who are at the top end of that distribution, that tiny, tiny percentage of people with super high IQs? Well, with the rare exceptions of Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, virtually all the rest of them are on the faculties of universities. Anybody who's ever worked in the financial services industry knows that almost no demographic in America is worse with money than intellectuals and academics on university faculties. So the idea that IQ produces, well, it's simply not true. If anything, it's the old adage you heard from your mother. She said, "Stop being too smart for your own good."
Right.
And it's absolutely right. We prosper by engaging in transactions. There is no other way to do it. Now, there are transactions that take place at the point of a gun, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about transactions where both parties are consensual.
Yeah.
In transactions, we all tend to select, for those with whom we would like to conduct transactions, people whom we know, whom we like, and whom we trust. And the truth is, most of us don't trust people we intuitively sense are much, much, much smarter than we are, because we feel that they have a sort of undisclosed agenda that we're not privy to. we like doing business with people we relate to comfortably.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so our working presumption is that the disproportionate success of Jewish business people around the world isn't because of some Jewish mafia. It's not because of extremely high IQs. It's because of implementing millennia of Jewish wisdom based on the Torah in our everyday lives. What would you say are some of the biggest principles or paradigm shifts as you know, say Christian, most of our viewers are Christian business people who want to grasp kind of the big, let's say, philosophical foundations of Jewish business. If you could point some of those out, that would be helpful.
It's difficult to say the most important one. It's a lot like, you know, anybody who has been happily married for a few years, whenever they're asked, tell us the most important secret of your happy, there isn't one. I'd say the most important secret is that there is no one important secret.
Right.
It's a lot of things. So the same is true here. And that's why my book is, you know, Thou Shalt Prosper, the 10 commandments for making money. But nonetheless, I can certainly answer your question in terms of a good starting place.
Right.
And a good starting place is to recognize the extent to which we are holistic. I think people today are beginning to understand the relationship between the soul and the body, between the mind and the body, the understanding that a great deal of our physical health resides inside our hearts and in our minds. There is a holistic aspect to it. And I think the same is true in understanding just how money works and understanding that our ability to do something is very much linked to our conviction in it being possible to do. And so some of the best football coaches or all sports coaches are not necessarily people who were best at playing that. They're the ones who are best at communicating to the team a strategy for success and a conviction in the inevitability of triumph. Those are the ones that do best.
So when you're talking about the changing your state of mind, you're saying that we can actually, our concept of business and success in business, of being number one good and number one attainable, it would be a fundamental shift of thinking for many audiences?
Most of us need to have an internal feeling of decency and virtue. One of the reasons that recycling became so popular so quickly in the United States, do you know what I'm talking about when I say recycling?
Yes.
One of the reasons it became so popular is because it provided a non-religious path to virtue. Anybody marketing electric vehicles in the United States, anybody working in a Tesla dealership will tell you that virtue is what they're selling.
Yeah.
And so this is a really important part of it. And so if people believe that making money is grubby and that making money is greedy, or at least an expression, a manifestation of greed, or that making money is exploiting other people, in other words, that nobody makes money, they take money. If you believe that, you are fatally handicapped in the business arena, because even if you force yourself to succeed, you're nonetheless going to feel you're doing something morally reprehensible. And no decent person ever succeeds to his full potential doing something that deep in his heart he believed to be morally reprehensible. And so a great deal of attention is paid in my teaching programs. An enormous amount of attention is paid towards understanding, if you like, what God's original intentions were for human economic interaction.
So why would making money be a virtuous thing? Why is it a good thing? Why is it something I should feel comfortable with?
That, of course, is the key question, and it isn't. it's not an easy or short answer, but I mean, it means literally readjusting one's entire perspective. And the reason I say this is because I would say, and look, until COVID, I was speaking at about 30 churches a year in the United States. Typically, I would speak to about 15 Jewish audiences. I'm thinking at large size audiences, about 15 Jewish audiences a year and about 30 Christian audiences a year. So I got to know and do know, I count among my dearest friends, many of the prominent Christian leaders in this country, of whom I think very highly. And so I will tell you very candidly that a very common problem, a very common virus, and I use that term because it is every bit as dangerous as other kinds of viruses, is the virus that teaches people to absorb into their hearts an equation that reads in mathematical terms, poverty equals virtue.
Right.
And unfortunately, this is found in many deeply committed Jewish communities as well, who also believe that their poverty is somehow a sign of their virtue, and who believe that that by turning their backs on money and spurning the world of finance and economic success, they are thereby showing their fealty to God Almighty. This is very, very common in America's Christian community, and unfortunately common also in my own community. And that was the other reason I felt very impelled to teach on this. And it's not easy because you're asking people to acknowledge that years of poverty and deprivation have been for naught.
Right.
But with that as the intro, let me answer your question. The first point is that one has to recognize the existence of a physical and of a spiritual world. Now, when I say spiritual, I'm not speaking about God. I'm not speaking about morality. I'm not speaking about sin. Spiritual is a quantitative descriptor. And here's what it is. It's very, very straightforward, but it requires a mental adjustment. Physical is anything that can be measured in a laboratory. Spiritual is anything for which no machine or mechanism exists for its measurement. Here are some examples of physical and spiritual. My height is a physical measurement. The color of my skin is a physical measurement. How much hair I have on my head, which isn't much, is a physical measurement. My integrity, if there was a way of measuring that and you found that way, you'd make $1 million in the first 6 months because there's not a single company or recruiting organization that wouldn't buy your product.
Right.
There is no way to measure integrity. There is no way of measuring loyalty. There's no way of measuring persistence. There's no way of measuring willpower and discipline. These are all spiritual qualities. Yes. Love is a spiritual quality. Joy is a spiritual quality. Now, people in marketing very often understand how important the spiritual side is. I know a woman intimately, whose name I will not disclose for anything, who will drive across town in order to buy gasoline at a place that her phone app reveals that gasoline is 15 cents a gallon cheaper.
Right.
That is, and I can explain all the physical phenomenon. I can explain to her that it's her time, and there's you using up gas going there, and it's wear and tear. It doesn't matter. She's from Brooklyn, New York, and the sheer pleasure of buying gasoline less expensively is worth it to her.
Right.
Somebody buys an item of clothing with a certain brand label on it. There's no utilitarian value in that. It's not an economic deal. It's a spiritual deal. And so we have to understand in economics and business the importance of the spiritual. In fact, an argument could be made that it's even more important in much of contemporary marketing. Apple's appeal is entirely spiritual because utilitarian value of an iPhone can largely be obtained for considerably less money.
So most of our crowd, when we're looking at spiritual principles, would turn to the Bible as a source of wisdom regarding spiritual principles. What does the Bible have to say about money being good or evil?
Well, what it says is that only human beings are capable of choosing between good and evil.
Yeah.
No animate object is intrinsically good or evil. No animal is intrinsically good or evil. If Tom kills Jerry, then we regard Tom's action as so evil that we cannot allow Tom to walk around society. We may well execute him because his action was evil. But if I'm a farmer and a wolf comes out of the forest one night and eats one of my sheep, I don't now hold a symposium on the declining morality of local wolves. The wolves do what wolves do. It's my job to better protect my livestock. But furthermore, what it says is that we have to ascertain whether money is physical or spiritual. And the reason is because it's a very fundamental law of physics that any physical object can only occupy one place at any given time. And so if I am right now in the state of Florida, I am not in Jerusalem. And that's all there is to it. And similarly, if I have a piece of cake in front of me, and when I turn my head, my cake is no longer on my plate in front of me, but my son has it on his plate next to him, the conclusion is pretty simple, and that is he took my cake.
Right.
And that is a reality for all physical objects. And therefore, if money is physical and I do not have very much, but the person next to me has a great deal, then he took it from me. And that makes it immoral. And therefore, the only moral thing for me as a moral person to do, I like to think of myself as a decent moral person, I must practice socialism and practice the redistribution of money for an equitable result for everybody, because it's something physical. That is exactly what I would do if I was a zookeeper. And I found that when I distributed all the food for the feed for the elephants, I come back and the biggest elephant has taken all the food, put it in front of him, and all the other elephants are sitting with no food, looking sadly at the big pile of food in front of the big elephant. I would redistribute the food. That's what I would do. Because if people are materialistic and animals, then redistribution under the terms of communism make perfect sense. I would lead the charge. You only have to convince me there's no God and that we human beings are here as a result of a completely materialistic, unaided, lengthy process of evolution, then I would have to become a socialist, because that means that money cannot be spiritual, it has to be physical, and therefore it has to be redistributed. But if money is more like a tune, see, if I sing a tune and a whole lot of people around me walk home with my tune, I'm not any less well off than I was before when they took my cake.
Right.
But spiritual things can be shared to the benefit of everybody. So you go away with my song and you are making my world a better place. And so it is that if you and I engage in a transaction and you buy goods from me, you pay $100 for those goods because they are worth to you more than $100. Otherwise, you would never have engaged in the action. And I sell it because I value $100 as more than the goods. Otherwise, I would never have parted with them. That is the secret of eBay.
Right.
And why you will never find animals, you'll never find dogs trading on the net present value of a bone. Hey, dog, how about you give that bone to this dog and he'll give you back 3 bones next Wednesday. Dogs don't operate like that because there is no such thing as the spiritual value of any asset. Only human beings have that. And so once we see that, in other words, for people who only view a materialistic world, and in the United States, there are more and more people like that, which is precisely why more and more young people are being drawn to the socio-economic moral structure of socialism, because if we are nothing but materialistic creatures, that makes perfect sense. And so that's that is the basic concept is that money is a spiritual commodity. Now, why is it moral, you ask? And for that, we have to go back to the 50th verse of Scripture, which says, "Not good for man to be alone."
Right.
Now, a lot of people assume that is talking about specifically about the matrimonial prospects of Adam. But of course it isn't. It is a general statement for all people and for all time. God wants us to connect with one another. And he gives us 2 mechanisms right early in the story. There are 2 mechanisms. The 2 mechanisms are marriage and money. And both of them are pleasurable. Making a profit and connecting with a woman are both pleasurable activities. And that is the goal. God does not want us to be isolated and disconnected. He penalizes those who are. The prime characteristic of the so-called homeless in America, the thing they share is very clear, something that is well known, and that is they share a disconnect from friends and family.
So what you're saying is, so you're saying money is a spiritual thing, and it connects people and creates value for each other, if I'm following you correctly. So we're not in a zero-sum game, that if one person has money, then they're taking away from somebody else. You're saying money is connecting us as human beings. Transaction and business are connecting us, which means we're not alone, and also creating value for each other, if I'm following you correctly.
Well, yes, and that's really important, because the problem is that as a society becomes more and more materialistic, it becomes harder to conceive of the notion that money is a spiritual commodity. And so, you can think about it like, is money the discs of metal clinking in my pocket? Or is it strips of colored paper in my wallet? Or perhaps it's the orientation of iron oxide molecules on the magnetic strip on the back of my credit card. Or maybe it's ones and zeros on the hard drive at my bank. Or maybe it's when I write you a check for $10. Maybe that's money. Or maybe we shake hands and I say, how about if I give you $10 on Friday? Well, that's money.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a spiritual representation of serving another one of God's children. That's what it is. So forget about Econ 101. Oh, it's a medium of exchange, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it's right. I mean, yeah, that's all very primitive. The reality of it is that it's evidence of you having served another human being. That's what money is. And in exactly the same way that any father is made happy by his children serving one another.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's a great moment in the life of any parent when your children stop squabbling and start cooperating.
Right.
Our Father in heaven is no different. When he sees us serving one another, it brings him joy. And so he is good enough to give us an incentive to serve one another. One of them is the sensual pleasure of creating a family, and the other is the pleasure of making money. Now, so strong is this spiritual imperative that people who get money in other ways very often find their lives diminished, not enhanced. For instance, in the United States, it's well known, people who win the lottery overwhelmingly have their lives diminished. Very often trust fund babies
Yeah.
are not fulfilled or creative or productive people.
Yeah.
But people who make their own money find joy in making money. And so they should, because it is evidence that they've served another human being. Now, you see that in the absence of all this, my making money is something I'm embarrassed about because I'm taking it from other people.
Now, you mentioned fathers wanting to see their children go out and succeed in life. And so if I have a child I have several daughters that are in their early 20s that are thinking about what career path to take and how will I find fulfillment in life, what would you say as a rabbi would be some basic advice that we can give to help people find the right profession, the right place to...
Am I speaking to your daughters?
You're speaking to my daughters.
How old are they?
Well, I have 26, 23, 20, and 12. So, yeah.
Okay. How many of them are married?
One of them is married.
So to her, I would say, talk to your husband and sit down and decide whether the two of you should engage in some entrepreneurial exercise together or work. You're already in good shape, but don't neglect raising a family, because ultimately at the end of the day, that will give you more fulfillment than running a company.
Right.
And to your three other daughters, including the 12-year-old, I would say, do not make the mistake of thinking that ultimate fulfillment will come from anything other than becoming a wife and a mother.
And I do have one son. We've been speaking about my daughters, but I have a son who's also going to be 26 this year. He's trying to decide what to study, what profession
How old
to go
is he?
into. He's 26.
What has he been doing since he's been 13?
He's an Israeli, so of course he's served in the army.
Excellent, good.
He actually did public service instead of the army, where he was working in a home. He was working in a home for abandoned children, and now he's gone back to improve some of his grades. And while he's doing that, he's working as a waiter in a restaurant. And he's
wonderful.
And he's considering
wonderful. That is a far more valuable education than an MBA.
That's great. But he's
and what does he want to study? What does he want to go back to school to study for?
He's considering studying architecture, but he's not exactly sure. And he's thinking right now, do I want to study architecture, or do I want to go into social services and continue the work with abandoned children and so on and so forth. So he's right at that point where he's trying to decide what to do.
Yeah. So explain to him that he will be able to do far more for children or any of the people who need help and for whom he rightly feels compassion once he has made a great deal of money. He will be far more useful. And number two, it will also give him a deep sense of fulfillment, far more ultimately than just being a social worker. And number three, is he married yet?
He's not married yet, no.
He is, let me put it very bluntly, and I'm saying this because we have limited time, I understand. And I would say it differently if I was sitting down with him over a cup of coffee at a cafe in Jerusalem, which I very much hope to be doing soon. But to just put it bluntly and briefly here and now, I would say to him that the quality of woman you could marry will be much higher as a successful businessman than as a social worker. In other words, I never speak disparagingly about women who are aware and conscious of the finances of the guy they're dating. What I call a woman who is dating a man and she knows nothing whatsoever about his financial life, a silly goose. And that is because a man's financial life, we're not talking about whether he's good at tennis. There are plenty men who are good at tennis and who are horrible human beings. Right. Not many successful business people who are horrible human beings. Yes, there are exceptions, obviously, but certainly in the record keeping of the Western world, there are many more doctors who sexually abuse their patients than there are business professionals. In other words, a far higher proportion of business professionals are moral, upright people than is true for doctors or teachers.
So let's say my son says, okay, I want to make money. I want to acquire money so I can marry a better person and so I can, live a fulfilled life. Where do I start? What's the best place to find my niche in making a good living?
This is not just because Mrs. Lapin didn't raise a foolish son, but I'm thinking about him as much as I am about me when I say he should read my book and study it very carefully. Right. Because it's a major shift. He right now, I don't even know him, but I can tell you from everything you've shared, I can tell you that in his heart, he believes that social work is a more moral course of action than making money. And so I would need to work with him on that and to help him readjust his breadth of thinking to be able to wrap himself around the fact that in a consensual, transparent market, the only way you make money is by improving the lives of other human beings. Right.
So are you saying, I know it's very difficult to make a comparison like this, but if you take a very wealthy person like Bill Gates, you mentioned Bill Gates, and you compare him to, let's say, Mother Teresa, who's out there.
Or let's take the most sagely rabbi living in Bnei Brak or in Asharim. And you have to hear me carefully on this, because whenever I say this, people go crazy. And I said it, there's a podcast called Kosher Money on YouTube. It's a Jewish thing. And I did an interview with them about a month or so ago. And it's gone viral. It's like 300,000 views or something. And a lot of hundreds and hundreds of comments. A lot of them are angry because on that I said that who has served more human beings? Who's been of more benefit to more people, Mother Teresa or Bill Gates? And I would say the same thing in the context of a venerable Hasidic rabbi, or if you like, Bill Gates, or a major Israeli entrepreneur. How many how many lives has that rabbi improved?
Right.
And the answer is very finite. You want to say, thousands? I'll grant you thousands of lives. Tens of thousands? Yeah, I'll grant you tens of thousands. Influential rabbi, ripple effect, many years of teaching people who taught other people. As many, 100,000 lives he's changed? Yeah, I'll grant you that. How about 500,000? Will you grant me? Yeah, I'll grant you 500,000. But even you have to see you're beginning to push the envelope now. Right. How many lives has Bill Gates changed? And the answer is billions, because that's the number of people who've bought Microsoft software. Now, nobody forced me to buy Microsoft software. I could have bought Apple. I could have used Linux. I could have done lots of other things. But I chose Microsoft because the benefits it brought to my life exceeded the cost of the software. It's as simple as that. Another way of saying that is Bill Gates improved my life.
I agree with you that people need to read your book. Like I said, I read your book a few times, and I will recommend it to my son. Do you have any other recommendations?
I would say that he has to analyze carefully and with searing self-knowledge whether he likes people. Because in the Torah, there's a principle called Ahavat Habriot in Hebrew. It means the love of humanity. Loving other people is an important consideration. And again, business is a wonderful way of doing that. I love my vendors. I love my suppliers. I want them all to do well. I do not want them to suffer and go out of business.
Yeah.
I feel the same about my customers.
Yeah.
I feel the same about my employees. There's a lot of people I pray for. But that's because I'm in business.
Yeah.
And so, so I would say, really the question of how you feel about human beings. And there are things you can do to change the way you feel. And I teach some of those things in my book. But it's really important to start your day really thanking God for the opportunity to interact with other human beings during the day. Solitary confinement sounds like a reward for a busy executive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it isn't. It's actually a torture.
Right.
We don't do well alone. Lo tov, it's not good for human beings to be alone. That is the 50th verse of the Torah. So that's one thing I would do. I wasn't joking when I said he's doing something valuable by waiting tables.
Right.
Because you learn what a boss means. You learn what money is. You learn interaction with other human beings. You learn about delivering value. You learn a great deal. And so even if he wants to study architecture, and I would say that if you set up a trust to give him a great deal of money every month so he can live in comfort in a nice apartment and drive a nice car while attending university, I would say you're making a sad parenting mistake.
Why? Why would that be a mistake?
Because if he could find a way to work while he's studying architecture,
Yes.
he will emerge with a far more rounded education and much, let me put it this way. You and I am sure we've both been around the block a few times. You and I could easily identify at least 10 very poor architects who are not making any money.
Right.
I really could. But I also know one or two who are very successful.
Yeah.
Now, the distinction has nothing to do with which university they attended.
Right.
And nothing to do with where they graduated in their class. It is entirely how well they've understood the principles of business.
And connecting to people.
Yes, and serving people, understanding how business works and how money works. And that's why some doctors are much more successful than others. It's not because they know more medicine. It's not that. It's because they've managed to make people not only be cured, but to feel grateful to them for curing them and for them to tell their names to many other people. In other words, it's customer service. Now, I also know doctors who are on the edge of destitution, and they're the ones who say, "No, I'm not going to worry. I'm not in the customer service. I don't care about a bedside manner. I cure my patients, and that's all I have to do." And they go hungry.
This is a very refreshing perspective. In the Christian world, Rabbi Lapin, I find that many times people talk about kingdom business or kingdom impact investing, and many times that means that business itself is not enough. I need to add something to that in order for this to be righteous. Either I have to donate a certain amount, or I have to hire a certain type of people, or pray for. And what you're saying is business itself is righteous because you are serving other people and learning to love other people through your business. You don't need to add anything to it.
You put your finger on that very, very eloquently. You're 100% right. I sometimes start speeches by saying, raise your hands if you want more money. And people try and slide down in their seats. You know, a few people have a sense where I may be going. They put up their hands, but people are very embarrassed to say that.
Right.
I say, look, I really prefer speaking to honest audiences than lying audiences. Stop lying to me. You would not have come to the speech look at the topic. The topic is how to increase your revenue this year. That's the topic. Why did you come here if you didn't want more? Of course you want more money.
Right.
Now I'm going to ask you, why do you want more money? And overwhelmingly, the answer is so I can give to the church, or I can give to the synagogue, or give to charity, and that's the expected answer. That's what they think is the only way to make up for the evil aspect of wanting to make money. This is exactly like the 17th century and 16th century pirates of the Caribbean.
Okay.
Of whom, by the way, there were many Jews. I don't know if you know that.
I'm not aware of that, no.
From which I take great pleasure, because I say to myself that if this rabbi thing doesn't work out, I do have an alternative career path. But what pirates used to do is, after a long and happy career of plunder, they would then settle in Kingston, Jamaica, and build a church. They would donate money for the church, and this way they would buy their way back into respectable society.
Right.
And that's what people think today now. And that's why, okay, you want to make more money? Why? Oh, so I can give charity. Giving charity is a totally different discussion.
Right.
Talk about that if you like. It's very important. It has nothing to do with this conversation.
Right.
In this conversation, in the process of making money, you have already helped other people.
Now, one of the principles you talk about in your book, which I just want to ask you to if we can delve into a little bit, is never consider retiring. That comes as a shock to a lot of people, a lot of business people. Many people today, everything they do is focused on saving enough money so one day I can retire and sit back with my legs up on my porch and watch the sunset or drink something on a beach somewhere. Why is that a bad idea from your perspective?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm not saying you shouldn't build up assets and acquire security.
Right.
I'm saying you shouldn't ever think of stopping to work. The first basic reason is because you'll die. Retiring is very unhealthy, and the statistics don't argue on this.
Right.
When you quit work, particularly for men, I'm one of those rare people in America who believe that male and female are totally different species.
We agree on that.
I suspected as much. And so for men, stopping to work is a terrible thing. But now let's look at it from a moral point of view. Do you play golf?
No, I do not play. Well, I have, but I wouldn't call myself a golf player.
Well, then you're ahead of me. I've never even played. But what I do know is that the golf swing is hugely important.
Right.
Golf coaches spend a lot of time teaching people where the golf club head must end up, somewhere up there.
Right, they swing through, yeah.
You got to follow through. To me, as a physicist, a person with training in physics, I think that's absurd. Because once the club has impacted the ball is now on its trajectory. And what happens to my club now is irrelevant. I can balance it on my nose. It's not going to change where the ball is going. And the coach says to me, Lapin, you're an ignoramus. What you don't understand is that if you don't plan the follow through, you won't hit the ball correctly in the first place.
Right.
Retirement is a very bad follow through idea.
Right.
And you won't hit the ball correctly if that's the follow through. Reason for that is, look at it this way. in the United States, April the 15th is tax day, you know. So April the 14th, I customarily walk into my accountant with my shoebox full of papers and receipts. I put them on his desk and I say, over to you, this is your problem. And that's it. It's never been a problem. All right, maybe I don't wait till April the 14th, but at some point he phones me up and says, can you please make out a check to the government for so many dollars and everything is good and this is, and we're done. And then I get a bill from him for his fee and I'm as happy as could be to pay it.
Yes.
This year I walk in and his desk is clear and he's in short pants and a t-shirt and he's hitting a golf ball around the carpet of his office with a golf club. Excuse me? You know, it's a week to tax day. What are you doing? Are you that well organized? He says, Rabbi Lapin, you must have heard I've retired. You've what? He said, I've retired. I say, how dare you? You villainous rascal, you dastardly scoundrel, how dare you? He says, why shouldn't I? I've got enough money. I don't have to work anymore.
Right.
I said, I never dreamed you were such a low-down human being. All this time, I thought you worked in order to make my life easier and all your other clients easier, and the money was a side benefit. And now I see we were just instruments to be used for your selfish purposes. You never really cared about me at all. That's what your retirement tells me.
Right.
This is about how much you can get. That's not how business works. Business works on credit. You always have to give before you can get. That's a fundamental principle of business. And we see it a lot on internet marketing, but anybody who's been marketing in the last 1,000 years knows full well, you give before you get, even on its most basic and fundamental level. You know, you put the shoes in the customer's hands and then you take the customer's credit card. That's how it works. And now you've not been interested in giving at all. And so retirement means that my whole plan all along is selfish. You cannot ultimately succeed to your full potential if deep in your heart you know you're behaving selfishly.
Wow. So
that would be another part of understanding that I would tell your son and everybody else, which is that I'm not saying work for free. We all understand you got to get your pay, you got to get your profit. I get all that. But and that's why I spoke about the need to love human beings. The underlying purpose is I like serving other human beings. I really do. I like being useful to other people. And why would I ever stop when I turn 65 for that? Why? Why would I stop doing something I love doing? I would never retire. Essentially, in Hasidic terms, if you like, what God says to the retired person is, oh, I see you've stopped serving my other children. Who needs you around any longer?
So if I'm now independently, economically independent, I don't need to make more money in order to maintain my standard of living. It's still a good idea to get up every day and to do something business oriented. That's what you're saying?
Absolutely. Make money.
Make money.
Yeah, that's the only way we know you're serving other people.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you shouldn't volunteer. Of course you should. That's part of your charitable contribution, but it isn't your main purpose.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your profound thoughts. And I want to direct our crowd again to your book, Thou Shalt Prosper, the 10 Commandments for success in business and finances.
And we also have online call, for people who are not crazy about reading. At my website at RabbiDanielLapin.com, people are welcome and there are ways there that they can master this material.
Right. And you have a fantastic podcast.
Thank you. Yes, I enjoy it also. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's really important that this stuff we're talking about makes the incredibly difficult journey from here to here. It's only 12 inches from the head to the heart. One has to wrap one's being around this way of thinking. It's not just informational.
Yeah. Well, I would encourage people to purchase and to learn all of your material that you have out there. It's been a great blessing in my life. I do hope that I will be able to have that coffee with you or in Jerusalem sooner than later. It'd be great to
And
see
with
you.
your son.
And with my son. That's a deal. You know, things are opening up now. So I was saying maybe Rabbi Lapin might be able to make it over here for Passover if that's something that you want to do, you know?
Well, I would love that. The thing at the moment is I refuse to sit in a mosque for 12 hours on an airplane. I just won't do it.
Right, right. Well, we all hope that those days will be behind us soon.
I hope so. And that's when I will be there, God willing.
Absolutely. So I look forward to meeting you in Jerusalem with my son. And thank you so much for your valuable input today into our summit. Really appreciate speaking to you, and we look forward to being in touch.
I look forward, and thank you for including me in this wonderful event.
Absolutely. Thank you. All the best. Wow, what an amazing summit. I know that I've been inspired, and I'm sure that you have too. And a special thanks to our speakers. You've taken time out of your busy schedules to come and contribute so much valuable information. And a special thanks also to the members of the Arise Alliance. Through your support, we are able to make productions like this happen. If you haven't become a member of the Arise Alliance yet, make sure that you sign up today. Thank you, and I look forward to staying in touch.
בשוב אדוני את שיר